because we have such confidence that you love us and care for us, and that you are able to take care of anything that needs to be taken care of. And all the important things we know have been taken care of, and the things that we tend to worry ourselves about are things that sometimes we shouldn't be distracted by. But we just trust you with the issues that we face, and just pray that you continue to give us wisdom and discernment so that we won't get sidetracked on things that we shouldn't, and that we give priority to the things that would please you to make the most of the time, especially the things that would help other people find a relationship with you so that they can have a hope that goes beyond this life. God, I'm just praying that you better prepare us again tonight as we study your word together, and I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I did not mark it in my Bible. Which verse did we stop at last? Matthew 5.
25.
Which verse?
25.
25. Okay, very good. Very good. This is talking about when you're, remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there. It's talking about making restitution or resolving conflicts, and talking how important it is, the relationship you have with other people. You know, this hit me the other day, just as a dad, and especially an older dad, a grandpa now and stuff. I can really relate to the fact that one of the best gifts my kids could give to me is if they got along really well with each other. They don't have to spend a whole lot of time with me if they were just really tight. You know, grandkids, kids, and everything else. It was kind of like, that just gave me pause, and I thought, yeah, that's probably the way God looks at us. You know, I would really appreciate it if you guys just got along, right? So, okay.
It would be a one accord.
Yes. And maybe that's one of the reasons why John says, don't say that you love your Father in heaven if you hate your brother. You know, you can't love God you don't see. If you hate your brother, you do see. So really got to work on those issues. So let's have verses 25 and 26. Rick?
Okay. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, for your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny.
Yeah, this seems like a stark warning here, doesn't it? Did you notice, though, back up in verse 23, when he's talking about making restitution or resolving conflicts, he's talking about your brother or sister in verse 23. In verse 25, he kind of shifts gears a little bit and says, settles matters quickly with your adversary. He could be talking about your brother and sister have kind of turned into, you know, adversarial relationship. But it seems like he's broadening this out and talking about, of course, you want to work on relationships with your brothers and sisters. And it kind of reminds me, and can I remind you of this too? The Bible does give a graduated response to relationships. We are supposed to do good and love our enemies, but the Bible does give kind of a hierarchy, if you will. If somebody's of the faith, we're supposed to give special attention to them, right? And if they're of the faith and related to us. And in particular, Paul tells Timothy that we're supposed to take care of our own kin, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're also supposed to take care of people in the household of faith, right? And then we're supposed to do good to all people. But it's kind of like a hierarchy priority there, right? And in the pastorals in 1 Timothy, one of the reasons for this is if families took care of families, then the church wouldn't have to take care of so many things, right? The church could take care of, the way it says in 1 Timothy, the widows who are widows indeed, right? They don't have any family. So then the church swoops in and takes care of them. But you know what? Sometimes the church is not as able to take care of some genuine needs because we're spending maybe too much time taking care of needs that aren't as genuine, right? So it's kind of like priority. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying turn a cold shoulder to people in need, but we actually have, don't talk about this very often, but dollars for deeds. We have it at both campuses. We always talk about, you know, it kind of started with above and beyond your regular offering, just put $1 in each week. And so if everybody who came in the doors, $52 a year, it would kind of add up, and it would be just a reservoir, not for regular offerings, but for those special needs that kind of fall outside those parameters. Well, the elders used to oversee that. They still do oversee it, but we have, I'll just go ahead and tell you, it's Joe. Joe's the guy in the wheelchair, and he is great because for years he worked with people with disabilities and things like that, like himself, but people who fell on hard times, and they would give him stories, and he would be like, I'm in a wheelchair, don't give me that story, right? Don't tell me how you can't get up and go to work because, right, and all this other stuff. Anyway, he handles our dollars for deeds, and the only reason I say this is we really do want to help out people with genuine needs. But some people come along and it's like they want to, well, how much money does your church have? Because I need this and this and this and this and this. No, what do you really need? What's the issue here? Okay, sorry to get off on that, but it seems to be like a graduated response, but I appreciate what he says here about trying to take care of things and don't let it go to court. Right? Try to resolve these issues. Try to resolve these issues on your own. Can I tell you one other quick story just comes to mind? There was an elder, he's no longer with us, but there was a guy who used to be an elder here, and we had our neighbors over here, lawyer contacted us, said, we're going to sue us. And I'm like, where'd this come from? And so we got in contact with the lawyer, and the lawyer sent us a description of what the issue was over, and it turns out it was something that had nothing to do with us at all. What it was, 25, 30 years ago, the people at the church at that time sold the rights to discharge water from Target over there. There's a swell over there, and there's a discharge, whatever they call those things, overflow.
Stormwater basin.
Stormwater basin. It goes right underneath our property. Well, they sold that to Target back when Target was first built 30 years ago, whatever, right? And they were suing us because the discharge over there where it goes in the canal was destroying the seawall. And so it's kind of like, this isn't even our issue. So it was a total misunderstanding, and it was, the thing was, nobody talked to anybody. They just got in touch with the lawyer and asked the lawyer to sue us. And so one of the elders who was running a business at the time, I got to sit there with them. We went over and had a meeting with the people who are homeowners association and stuff, the people who hired the lawyer and stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, I had the legal papers with me to show that it wasn't our issue, and I was able to do all this stuff. I mean, I could have just shown them the whole thing. But before I said a word, we go over there, and the elder, he didn't physically do this, but it was kind of like he put his arm around him. And he said, yeah, we want to be good neighbors. How can we make you happy? What was it that's really bothering you here? And he just had this gentle tone about him, and he talked with them and stuff, and it's kind of like they apologized for suing us and stuff before we ever got to it. We eventually explained to him, by the way, this isn't our issue, you're contacting the wrong people. But his whole demeanor there, I don't think I'll ever forget that, because it was just such a, I mean, he was a businessman. And I would have thought, well, he's going to deal with it like a lawyer. Right? No, he dealt with it like a Christian. Yeah. Right? First thing he did is, I can understand if your property's falling apart, you're upset about it, and you want to figure out who's at fault here. What can we? I just appreciated the whole thing, and it makes me think of this passage. Why jump immediately to what the law has to say and the lawsuits and everything else if you can just resolve it, right? Mm-hmm. Just talking with people.
Paul had a lot to say about that in Corinthians. First Corinthians.
Yes. Oh. Yeah. Well, especially the Christians.
Well, that's the thing. It was even worse because it was Christians against Christians. Well, in that case, the adversary was another brother or sister. Not good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing. Okay, verses. Verse 27, let's have verse 27 through 30.
Me?
Yes, please.
We have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. I say to you that whosoever looks on a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
Okay, that's good enough. Let's just have 27, 28. Okay, when he says that you have heard it said, you remember we introduced this. Can you go back and look at verse 17 for just a minute? He says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Remember, this is the context? Okay, so all these statements, it's verse 21, verse 27, verse 31, 33, 38, 43. You've heard it said, repeatedly, he is not changing anything God has already said in the Old Testament. He's talking about what you've heard said, not what God said. So he's dealing with misrepresentations. Okay. Before we specifically address this, you tell me, you've been studying this for a while, what were some of the misrepresentations of the Pharisees and the teachers in Jesus' day when it came to marriage and divorce? Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A certificate of divorce for any and all reasons, they said.
Moses gave them that ability, so they were able to produce a divorce whenever they wanted to.
Okay. Some took it
That way, right.
that way. That's exactly right. Two main schools of thought, Shammai and Hillel. And guess what? The most popular one was the liberal one, right? Where, I think the famous statement was, if she burns the toast in the morning, divorce her.
Right.
So that was any and everything, right? If she displeases you at all. Okay. Another example we have of religious leaders in Jesus' day was there were some rabbis, some teachers, who would divorce their wives if they knew they were taking a trip. Remember this? They would divorce their wives before they took a trip. So when they're out of town, they find the lady that most pleases their eyes and marry her so they could sleep with her the whole time they're out of town. And then they divorce her when it was time to come back home and remarry their wife. That way they didn't break any laws.
Yeah.
Okay, this is pretty bizarre. So no doubt Jesus would say, listen, you've heard a lot of stuff and it does not represent God well, right? So on this marriage issue, when he talks about you shall not commit adultery, what is the difference between adultery and fornication?
Adultery is somebody that's married.
That's exactly right. If you're in a marriage relationship and you have sexual relations with somebody that you're not married to, that's adultery, right? To have sexual relationships with somebody that you're not married to and you're not married, that's still against God's law, but we don't use the term adultery, we use the term fornication. I'm sorry to go over the basics again, but I had a conversation last year with a young lady who said, oh no, it's not a sin because we're not married. I'm having sex with a guy and he's not married to anybody. And I said, well, congratulations, it's not adultery. It's still a sin. I didn't say congratulations. I didn't say it.
Oh, you
In
weren't
my
sarcastic?
mind. Okay. But Jesus, and he's going to do this with just about all of his topics. He's not just going to deal with what is the issue. It's faithfulness to a marriage relationship, right? He's going to get to what are the attitudes that gets you to the bad place, right? Just like on the subject of murder we dealt with last week, he's not just going to deal with killing somebody. What's the kind of attitude that gets your heart in the place that will eventually lead you to the place where you're going to kill somebody? Amen. So come back here and deal with that, right? Okay. In the case of marriage relationships, though, he says, don't commit adultery. And by the way, Jesus is all for that. Doesn't want anybody committing adultery. But he says, I tell you, somebody who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay, I don't want to take away from what Jesus says at all, but I really do want to be as clear with this as I possibly can. First of all, when he says looks at a woman, this is in the present tense in the Greek language, which means what he's talking about, and I really do hope this helps, because I've talked to so many guys, it's kind of like, I can't help what I see sometimes. Most of the time I don't buy that, because I think you can help what you see. But there are times when no doubt, you're at a wedding or a funeral. Oh my. I can't believe what some ladies wear to funerals. But anyway, you're at a funeral. I'm spoiled because when I go to church, most people at church are very modest, right? But I'm reminded when I go to gatherings that aren't church, and sometimes women come in and it's like, whoa, I didn't need to see that, right? Okay, the present tense means sometimes you see something, but it's up to you if you keep looking, right? So once you see something, that's not what this is talking about. But it's talking about ongoing looking. It's kind of like you see it once, that's not your fault. You turn back and look again, that is your fault. Okay, I've said enough, haven't I? Okay. The other thing here is lustfully. So it's the repeated look, and I'll just leave it at the sexual desire, right? So it's not, I'm talking to guys, so I'll just go ahead and say this. I don't understand how men can say, well, I'm only looking at her for artistic beauty or whatever. No, you got the same feelings I've got. I don't buy that. No. You know, if you were a eunuch, I might buy that. But since most guys I know are not eunuchs. Okay, I've said enough. I don't want to get embarrassing here. You guys get the idea, right? So Jesus is getting at the attitude that leads to the problem. And the attitude here is you're allowing your mind to go to places it shouldn't because you're looking at things you shouldn't, right? Not the stuff that comes into your field of vision that you didn't have any control over, but once you know it's there, you do have control over it. You're going to look again, and then your mind goes west. Yeah.
I just got a question just hit me. There, for lust, isn't there a word that almost means like love in Greek that is used right with a marriage? You look at your wife lustfully, and now you have that intimate relationship.
Yeah.
But it also can be used wrong.
Yes.
It's
called eros. I don't think I need to pull up Blue Letter Bible. Let me pull that up real quick. But I don't think it's the word eros. Okay. Yeah. But that is the word that. Does somebody have that verse? What is it? Verse 28.
Yes.
Let me pull it up, and I'll tell you what the Greek says here.
I have it. I just don't know how to use it.
When you tap on the verse,
Yeah.
it will give you the Greek.
No, it just gives me
it will give you tap on interlinear,
Oh, there we go.
and then it says,
Oh yeah, you can.
yeah.
It's right in Greek.
You see
Oh, no, it's epithumia. Epithumia is a word that just means excessive desire.
Okay.
So,
That makes sense.
which is an interesting word too, because desires are not bad. It's when desires get out of control that they're bad, or desires in the wrong place that are bad, right? So, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because there is. Can I use the old example? I've always loved this example. The example of fire. Fire in a fireplace is a beautiful thing. Fire in an internal combustion engine, beautiful thing. Fire in industry can be a beautiful thing if it's used correctly. But a fire in the middle of your living room, that's a bad thing. A fire, in the back seat of your car instead of that's a bad thing, right? So sex and lustful desire, hopefully you have those kind of desires in a marriage relationship physically for each other to make your marriage stronger. But you take it out of the place where God designed for it to be. It's like pulling fire out of the fireplace and moving it into the middle of the living room, which burns the house down, right? And to extend the metaphor, until you're a certain age in a marriage relationship, you're not supposed to build any fires anyway, right? So, all right. Verses 29 and 30.
Find it. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. How far did you say to read?
One more verse, yeah.
Okay. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell.
Yeah, I really appreciate the point that Jesus is making here. And sometimes people point at a verse like this and say, "Oh, Jesus is talking about awful things here, cutting parts of your body off and everything." If you look at it in context, I think what he's saying here is, I'll give you an example of this. There was a young man here in college. He was college age a few years ago, and he was having problems because it was so easy for him to get pornography on his phone. So he traded in his nice smartphone and got a dumb phone. Kind of phone you could only make calls on but couldn't get any images on. That's like cutting your hand off. I mean, especially for a college student, a smartphone, that's like, whoa. But you know what? He wasn't able to control his desires, and so he cut off the source. I think that's it. I think we could extend this to, there are some people you shouldn't hang around, some places you shouldn't go, maybe some devices you shouldn't have, maybe your TV watching, guys, maybe that should be a thing you only do with your wife. Things like that. When nobody else is around, if it's too strong of a temptation, just say, guess what? I'm just not going to watch TV, because if I watch TV and my wife's not there, I tend to go to the channels that are a little more risque or whatever it is. I think the principle here is great. I don't think Jesus is talking about, everybody needs to cut their arms off and stuff like that. He's just using that as an illustration. It makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to me, it makes great sense, because wouldn't you rather end up in heaven with a little less TV time than watching all the shows you want to and end up in hell? Right? Okay. Bluntly stated. Verses 31 and 32.
You've heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery.
Okay, thank you so much. This is interesting because of we sometimes refer to it as the except clause. Okay, so the point he's making is definitely against the Hillel school, the Shammai and Hillel school. The Hillel school was the popular school of thought in Jesus' day that said you could divorce for any reason. And he's definitely saying that's not what God wants. And in Matthew chapter 19 is where he's going to go into a lot more detail. And he's going to say, from the beginning, this is not the way God wanted it. He's going to talk about the hardness of heart, why God allowed some of these things to take place. That's not what God desires. But he does have this except clause in verse 32, except for sexual immorality. Okay, we usually take that to mean when somebody's been unfaithful to the marriage relationship. I got to be honest with you, though. The word in the Greek language here is porneia. And it usually means unfaithful in the marriage relationship, having sex with somebody who you're not married to. But it's a broader term than that. It can mean you've been unfaithful even if you haven't slept with somebody else. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure we understand exactly what Jesus is saying here. I don't want us to make it any more narrow, but I don't want to make it any broader either. But the term is a little broader than sometimes what we say. Jesus doesn't say somebody has to get a divorce because somebody's been unfaithful. I've seen several cases of where people survived infidelity through their marriage and came out stronger on the other side.
I think about that prophet that was told to marry a harlot.
That'd be Hosea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not only was he told to marry a prostitute, after they had some kids, she decided to go back to prostitution again. Mm-hmm. And he was told, go buy her back. So even after, that's, wow.
I think that was, it was to be an example of the church.
Yes. Picture God's relationship with his people. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
And do you remember what he named the kids? Remember, names were so significant in the Bible? And so this whole picture, he's supposed to marry a prostitute. That's supposed to picture God's relationship with us. We're like prostitutes, right? Because we're so unfaithful. Which is really interesting when Jesus talks about adultery. I'm sure he's talking about adultery in a marriage relationship here. But a lot of times he's talking about more than just more than just marriage. He's talking about our relationship with God, right? Okay. He has one kid, lo am I, lo ru am I. This kid, lo am I, lo ru am I. Those names mean this one's not mine.
Wow.
What an awful name.
Wow.
Got 2 kids. Yeah, this one's not mine.
Well, yeah.
What does the other one mean? I don't love him.
Oh, nice.
Ah.
Ooh.
Kids that grew up
For a
with
child.
inferiority.
Okay, there's a guy, used to be an ESPN, you guys help me out here. And his name's Stephen. People think that he's got political
Stephen A.
aspirations.
Smith.
What is his name?
Stephen Smith.
Heard today, I read an article today, that he said what really motivated him to make something out of himself is when he was in, I don't know, grade school, junior high, I guess junior high. He had severe dyslexia, he had some learning disabilities, and they were going to hold him back in school. He overheard his parents talking. Have you read this? Overheard his parents talking, and his dad was explaining to his mom, you expect too much from him. He's never going to make anything out of himself. He's just not mentally capable of doing that. He's just going to be a stupid kid. Said just brutal things. And his mom looked over his shoulder and saw little Stephen standing, middle school age, whatever, junior high age. And his dad turned around and saw him too. Just kind of shrugged his shoulders and walked away. So when I heard my dad say, I'm just going to be an idiot and never going to make anything out of it, that's when he doubled down and made something out of his life. Sorry to get off on that, but that's the name that they gave the kids to picture that relationship. Okay, so Jesus does qualify. There is one exception here. I need to make a comment on the end of that verse, but before I do, there is another reason for divorce given later.
Yep.
Remember what that is?
That was from Paul.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 7.
And
why are we adding another reason?
If you're married to a non-Christian and they don't want to live with you because you become a Christian, you can.
That's right. That case, that scenario was not around in Jesus' day. But once the church starts, when people become Christians, and the assumption here is they were both non-Christians. The reason we have that assumption is in that same chapter, 1 Corinthians 7, when you marry somebody, you have to marry a Christian. Right?
Even the yoke.
Yeah. So you have to marry a Christian. So if both man and wife are not Christians, and then one of them becomes a Christian, and the other one wants to leave them because of the faith, but he says, if they're willing for you to stay, you stay, because you can have good influence on them. Right? But anyway, that's the second exception. Now, explain to me the last part of verse 32. He says, if somebody does divorce their wife, and it's not because of sexual infidelity, they make the divorced woman commit adultery. How did your translation say it? Does it say commit adultery?
It's adultery.
Makes her the victim of adultery.
different translation.
Okay. What did it say commit adultery, or what did it say?
It's a verse, yeah, it's adultery.
Okay. Because that phrase, by the way, can be translated a couple different ways. So that's why I'm not surprised.
Well, mine says anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. Does that mean you're not allowed to marry a divorced woman?
That's what it just said.
Yeah.
That's what mine says too.
Good answer.
I think they're talking about if somebody was divorced for the wrong reason.
Yes. Because he said except.
Yeah.
Except, okay. So let's play that scenario out. Let's say that somebody got divorced and it wasn't for the right reason. Does that mean they're not allowed to get remarried?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because that sin can be forgiven just like any sin. It's not a life sentence, which unfortunately has been by, we'll just say Christendom as a whole, and denominationalism has made that a life sentence. Oh, you can never be married again unless you go back to your original husband and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that really concerns me.
Yeah.
Okay, all this, one of the strongest arguments here is if somebody gets a divorce and it's not for sexual infidelity, right? They're going to look at that divorced person and they're going to think it was sexual immorality. So they're stigmatized. They're stuck with the label as an adulterer because you divorced him. And the only reason that you should divorce him is for the infidelity. And even if it wasn't, people are going to think that. That's one of the strong arguments that people bring to this, because 1 Timothy chapter 4 says, in later years, the Spirit clearly says people will abandon the faith, teach deceiving doctrines taught by demons, right? They forbid people to marry. So I feel very uncomfortable when the church says you're not allowed to marry, unless they're already married. I'll go with the polygamy thing. But if somebody's not married and they want to marry somebody else, I feel very uncomfortable with the church saying you're not allowed to marry. I don't mind telling them, though, the reason you got a divorce is not something God permits. So that was sinful. But I don't think, I'm just telling you my opinion, I don't think it's our place to tell people they're not allowed to get married again. And one of the reasons I think that is when Jesus met the woman at the well, he didn't say you were married one time and then you had 5 other relationships. No, he said you were married 5 times. He looked at each one as a marriage, right? And now she's living with somebody she's not married to. So he understood the difference, but he calls it marriage. So I think I've said enough. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that reading through the Bible multiple times, one thing I noticed is that God's had to put up with a lot of sexual immorality from his people, even from the people that are his strongest people.
King David.
King David's a good king.
Man after God's own heart, right?
Not the only one that's had more than one wife and all this. And I know you can get into this is a political thing and that and all. But the fact is, there was a lot of things going on in the Old Testament, ancient times, that really wasn't the way God intended it. But he obviously, for lack of a better word, overlooked it or whatever it is. And Jesus is still trying to get people to think of this right and do the right thing, but it can be overcome and it can be forgiven, and so some people, when they want to make too much out of it to the point of making up doctrine that isn't right, yeah.
Right. But this obviously cuts to the heart of people saying, well, I'm just not happy in the relationship.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you can change your heart.
Mm-hmm.
You can work on the relationship. That's not an excuse, right?
That's right.
There's only one reason here, and there's a second reason given later why God would actually permit divorce. Other than that, the answer is you need to work it out.
Yeah.
Just like, even more so in a marriage relationship, but just like if you've offended somebody else and they offend you, you need to work it out. Relationships need to be worked out. And I know it's hard. And I know some people it's difficult, but it's kind of like, that's what he's calling us to, right? Okay.
When I got divorced, from my first wife,
Yeah.
I felt like I could not be a leader in the church anymore. Because if I couldn't control my own family, how could I expect to be an effective leader in the church?
Yeah. I had a preacher friend who died a few years ago. For years, he was single because his wife divorced him. And it was just such a sad, sad thing. They had a good marriage. She was an automobile wreck that changed her personality, messed with her mind. And she thought all sorts of crazy things. She thought like he was messing with her phone and she thought all sorts of crazy things about him, and so she divorced him. And I guess in Indiana at that time, you didn't have to have both parties agree. Somebody could divorce somebody else. And so he never remarried or considered anything because he knew it wasn't for infidelity. And so for him, he didn't want to go there. I don't think he had to draw those kind of lines simply because even though the divorce was not for the reasons that God said, even though it was not for that, it's still a divorce. Right? So, yeah. I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road, because people are in relationships all the time and things go south. And Jesus is just saying, there's all sorts of bad things that happen. Set the bar high. Let's have good marriages. Let's have good relationships, and let's not settle for less.
I got a question.
Yes.
Going backwards a little bit. I was approached by a woman, and she asked me for physical abuse by her husband.
Yeah.
She wanted to seek out divorce, and the only place I could go to in back is in back where Paul was talking about, if you're married to her, and she actually said her husband's a Christian, and I go, I can't believe he's a Christian if this is what he's doing to us, for one thing. So I think that's where you should look at it, is in what Paul says. It doesn't look like he wants to look at your faith as something to approach, and that's why so that was my advice. She never came back to me. I just was wondering if that was incorrect.
Well, you didn't tell her to get a divorce, right?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because, they had abuse in the first century too. Mm-hmm. And God knows that people are abused. He doesn't include that. So what should an abused wife do? She should call the cops and have her husband arrested.
Right.
Seriously. Mm-hmm. God has governing authorities in positions to take care of things like that so that innocent people won't get hurt. So call the authorities. Is there any other out? Yes. Separation. You can separate from somebody. You can remove yourself from the situation. You can call the cops. There are things you can do before you get to that divorce line. And sometimes people want to jump to that line first, right? And yeah, no, I think you gave good advice. Because we're not telling people, oh no, you just have to let your husband rape you every night. You have to let your husband beat you because that's what it means to be. No, the Bible does not endorse things like that. But neither does it say you're not happy, get a divorce.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Sometimes we present hypothetical situations. Sometimes they're real situations. But there's things you can do. Right? I appreciate the discussion, guys. Okay, let's go on to oaths. What comes out of your mouth? Let's have verses 33 through 37.
Again, you have heard it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but keep the oaths you have made to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one.
Very good. Very good. Okay. I think it helps to understand the situation that Jesus was dealing with. You don't have to understand the situation of the day to get the main point, but I want to explain this anyway. The Pharisees, they had intricate laws like on the Sabbath, right? How many steps you could take, what kind of knots you could tie, all sorts of crazy things. They're hedges. They built so many hedges around the laws, right? Okay. They also had hedges built around oaths. And they had examples such as if you swore by the temple, then you could do whatever you want. But if you swore by the gold of the temple, you had to keep your word.
Huh?
I know.
Like they had it, an intricate system set up where you could take all sorts of oaths. I swear by my Aunt Phyllis's grave or whatever. And if you were a Pharisee and you paid attention to what somebody was saying, you're just like, he's not going to keep his word because of the way he said his oath, right? So they had an intricate system set up of things you could say and not keep your word versus keep your word. And so definitely Jesus is attacking that. It's kind of like, you know what? If you're a man of God, what comes out of your mouth, people ought to be able to believe it, right? so shy of, cursing somebody out, calling down curses on them, all that other stuff, people ought to be able to take us at our word. In fact, I really think this is a huge issue because the battle of the ages is truth versus the lie. People can't trust us, what comes out of our mouth. So it's not necessarily lying, it's not that far, but if we don't have credibility with people, I think that hurts too. Now, the question I've got for you though, is does this mean, some people take this passage to mean that when you're in a court of law and it's time for you to testify and they say raise your right hand, do you swear, whatever they say?
To tell the truth.
The whole truth, thank you.
So help me
It's been too
God.
long since I watched Perry Mason. Okay, some people believe they're not allowed to say that for religious reasons. Can't take an oath because of this. What do you say to people like that? Do you agree with that?
I think they might, from what you've said, I think we've been taking this wrong. He's trying to say you shouldn't need to take an oath to be believed.
I think that's the core.
Not
shouldn't have to
sinful.
take an oath to be believed.
Yeah.
But is he saying you're not allowed to make any oaths?
I don't think so.
Greg was shaking his head no here. But
I don't
yeah.
think so.
I don't think so either, simply because we've got examples of guys in the Bible doing it.
Yeah.
At the beginning of Galatians and the beginning of Romans, Paul, in essence, swears by God that he's telling them the truth. It's kind of like, ooh, Paul, didn't you listen to the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's not Paul. That's the Holy Spirit writing through Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, since the Scripture also gives us examples of this happening, I think we're taking it wrong. I think the main point is Jesus is saying you ought to be a person of your word. What you say, people ought to believe it instead of, I'm sorry, I just have this image of a car salesman. Just saying all sorts of things because he doesn't want to say it's going to break down in 10,000 miles. He's saying, the air conditioning's ice cold. Look at that paint job. And he's focusing on all these other things. And it's kind of like, yeah. Don't trust you, right? Okay.
I have a hard time, the more and more I hear, the more I can't believe that they actually call themselves religious people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And they were all over the map. There were some real sincere guys.
oh, I'm sure there were.
Yeah, but like Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, but they made a joke of relationship with God. And it makes perfect sense why Jesus was so upset with these guys.
Yeah.
And he didn't pull punches.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, verses 38 through 42.
You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you.
Okay. Let's go back up to verse 38. You've heard it said, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. And a lot of people say, hey, that's straight out of the Old Testament. And there is a verse in the Old Testament. Do you have that verse?
There's 3 of them.
Okay.
Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
Every one of those verses, though, is talking about judges, talking about people who have to make decisions. And you know what? A good judge to do justice needs eye for eye, tooth for tooth. He needs to judge fairly and appropriately, right? This was never intended in any of those passages in the Old Testament for interpersonal relationships, right? And yet, that's the way a lot of the Jews took it.
I'm okay with all of that except for if you slap me.
Okay, the slap is interesting because he doesn't.
Sure, man. That's fine.
Yeah, he doesn't just say slap. He says slap you on which cheek?
Right.
Yeah, what's so significant about that?
That's what you poop in.
Either that or you backhanded somebody. You always use your right hand, right? So backhanding somebody is more of an insult, right? So he's not just saying somebody slapped you, somebody humiliated you, right? So tried to take you down in public. I think this is all about interpersonal relationships. he's saying don't take the law of the land and bring it into your interpersonal relationships. You be gracious to other people the way God's been gracious to you, right? So somebody backhands you, somebody wants to sue you and take your shirt, which, by the way, Old Testament law, if the cloak, the outer garment, they had to return it to you at night, right? Because that was your blanket.
That's right.
They're saying you willingly give that up, right? You willingly give up what you don't have to. Okay, my take on this would be in interpersonal relationships as a person. In fact, I can't go there. Let me just throw out this scenario. Let's say that you got yourself into some terrible financial condition. You had to declare bankruptcy. You declared bankruptcy, and there's all sorts of different bankruptcies. I understand that. But let's say the banks decided that you don't have to repay your debts. I think you still do. Even though you're protected by the government, even though it's going to take you a long time, if you incurred the debt, to be a person of your word, even though the government's going to, the law's going to protect you. I've heard so many cases where Christians will go back to somebody and say, hey, listen, I know I don't have to repay you. And I can't. It's going to take me a long time. But when I get on my feet, I'm going to start making payments to you because I don't feel good about being a godly person without trying to make things right. And I think it speaks volumes. I think it speaks volumes for the Lord in a good way, right? So turning the other cheek, going the second mile, doing what you don't have to do, right? The government protects you. The laws protect you when you declare bankruptcy, but you're going to go the second mile and you're going to pay back anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think there's something to be said here for his verse 39, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. I think he's trying to make a point of how we deal as Christians with when we're confronted with evil that's going to directly affect us. How do we react? Because again, everybody's watching, especially if it's happening out in the open. You know, when the government here got upset with the mural on the what was that? The dumpster wall. We didn't fight it. We didn't resist the evil person. A lot of us wanted to, and that's American. You know, it's kind of hard not to. But as a church, the last thing we want to do is give people the wrong idea, even if we're in the right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's trying to tell you here is how you deal with these evil people.
Yeah,
You don't always have to fight back. I'm thinking of the meaning of the word meek, being meek. You know, this is a good example of what meekness is. You could, but you won't.
Right. Yeah, in these interpersonal relationships, it makes me think of the proverb that talks about a soft answer turns away wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of you going toe-to-toe and doing what you have every right to do and fighting them back and suing them back and stuff like that, you don't play that game. You try your best to be gracious. This does not mean, though, look at that last verse, which is verse 42. Do not turn away from one who wants to borrow from you. Mm-hmm. There are times when you should turn away. How do I know that? Because over in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, it says, somebody who's not willing to work, neither should they eat. The only way they're going to eat is you give it to them. There are some people you should withhold help from because you're not really helping them. But the principle here is be the gracious person who really wants to help. It doesn't mean be a doormat so people run all over.
No.
It means the higher good here. You want to accomplish something good.
That's right.
And so you're going to go above and beyond what they would expect from other people.
Mark?
Yes.
Going back to what you said, I think it also goes with anger. He says there's two times, you're right to be angry when somebody does something that's against God.
Yes.
Okay. So
Jesus himself.
So there's a time where you won't, if that's what they're doing, you're not going to stand there and say, that's okay.
Right.
You're exactly right.
Okay. So there is a time.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So absolutely. I just want to, we don't always just say, oh, it's okay, I'm going to go over here and be meek, right?
Yeah, in the same reason we were talking a little bit about last week, where I think the Bible really endorses a just war. We're not pacifists. We do in interpersonal relationships always react mercifully, and we're gracious. But there's times when we step up and defend the innocent, which means sometimes we're going to take down the evildoer to protect the innocent, right?
And I would say, yeah, if you're to protect somebody else, absolutely. There is because again, this is about something happening directly to you.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 3.
Time and season for
Every good Saturday.
That's true, including war.
yeah, yeah. Very good. I appreciate the discussion again. Verses 43 through 45.
You have heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Yep. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous.
Okay, thank you. This is a great example. You have heard it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. Where does it say that? Nowhere. Nowhere in the Bible. It does say love your enemy, Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor as yourself is in the Old Testament.
That's what they
right.
reference.
But there's no place in the Bible where it says hate your enemy.
Yeah.
So he's obviously saying this is Jewish teaching you're hearing.
Yep.
It's okay to hate your enemies. No, it's not okay to hate your enemies. Got a bigger picture here. We're honoring God and living for Him. Let me tell you a personal story, because this one comes to mind, and I've probably told you before. But I was working with a church in Nashville, Tennessee, actually Franklin. We had a meeting in Nashville of area ministers, and at that time, it's been over 30 years ago, I was working with the youth. I was also the preacher, but we didn't have a youth minister, so I was wearing both hats, right? Smaller church. And there was a meeting of the youth ministers. And one of the things we were talking about at that meeting was this wicked, evil woman at the time called Madonna.
Yeah.
Because she was ruining the minds of the teenagers, you know, and we were just so concerned about it. And I can remember the feeling I had at the time. I don't remember a lot of the specifics, but I remember, yeah, man, there's just wicked people in the world, and one of them is Madonna, you know. It was just, and the reason I remember this feeling so strongly is there was a guy from the east side of Nashville, and if I thought about it long enough, I could tell you his name. I think it was Bob, but anyways, he was a minister on the east side of Nashville. And his comment, we were talking about the wicked influence of Madonna, and he leaned in and he says, yeah, we really should be praying for Madonna. And I was like,
Yep.
it's the last thing I thought. I was thinking of praying against Madonna.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about praying for Madonna. But it was such a knife in the chest moment for me, because I was thinking, he is exactly right. Because the best of all scenarios, you know, I was thinking of, you know, God strike her with cancer. But the best thing would have been for her to turn 100% to the Lord and be a committed follower. Then what kind of influence? That would be the best of all possible. That didn't enter my mind.
You just joined John and James.
It's terrible. It's
Somebody
terrible.
did something.
But I really think that's, to me, that's the illustration comes to mind every time I read this. It's kind of like, pray for those who persecute you. Yeah. You know what? The best thing that we could do with our enemies is to pray for them to come to the Lord. Right? It's not only good for them, it'd be good for everybody. Okay. Verses 46 through 48.
If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Okay, let me go in reverse order here, because that word for perfect is unfortunate to translate. It doesn't mean perfect, it means complete. It means be a well-rounded person, be the kind of person God wants you to be. And what does that mean? On another occasion, Jesus uses the example, don't invite people over to your house that you know can invite you over to their house. You know, don't put on a feast for people that you know they can put on a feast and you're going to eat big at their house. No, invite somebody that you know can't pay you back, right? So be genuinely good. And he's going to go into some examples of giving and fasting and some other things not to be seen. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into this because it's let's at least get the first few verses before we quit, because it's going to, I think, really help us understand the main point that he's making. Chapter 6, verses, let's just have the first verse.
Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven.
Yeah. Okay. Jesus, in particular, has much to say about receive your reward in full right now, if you do it to be seen by people, versus getting God's rewards, right? Like over in Mark the 10th chapter, he talks about there's not a person who's come to follow me, hasn't given up father, mother, brother, sister, homes, that will not receive 100-fold in this life, along with persecutions. Along with persecutions.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's definitely talking, because that's in the context of the rich young ruler. Remember the rich young ruler? Jesus tells him, sell all your stuff, come follow me, and he goes away sad because he has so much stuff. And then Peter is the one who turns to him and says, well, we gave up a lot of stuff to follow you. You know, it's kind of like Peter saying, what about us? And then Jesus responds by saying, everybody. So the point is, if you're doing it to be seen by other people, God's not going to give you anything, right? But if you're sincere in this, God's more than going to take care of you. He really will reward the sincere person doing it for the right reason.
Then I have a confession.
Okay.
Whenever I go out to eat, it doesn't matter who I'm with, I ask if I can pray, and I do not pray quiet.
Oh,
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Okay, so
Okay.
I do a prayer, and I mean, lots of times we get other people saying, wow, we don't see people.
That's
that
right.
are out there."
That's right.
But I'm doing it not only to pray to God and thank Him for the food, I want other people to hear that there's a bunch of Christians here and we're praying.
I think
I
that's
like
okay.
that. I really like that.
Okay.
And we're out of time, but let me drip water on this. We're going to come back and talk about this next week. To get to the heart about what Jesus is really saying, he's saying some powerful stuff here, but he's going to say, pray in your closet, not to be seen by people. You know what the very next thing Jesus does? Prays a public prayer. It's like, whoa, make up your mind, Jesus. Should you pray publicly? The point is how you pray. When you pray publicly, because Jesus is a great example of this, he prays publicly, not so people will come up and pat him on the back. Man, that was a great prayer. Man, no, that's not the purpose of it, or to impress people. But there is a time and a place to pray publicly. Same thing with the giving. He says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. You know what Jesus does? He calls his disciples, hey, come over. I want you to see this woman give. Remember the woman who put in So make up your mind, Jesus. Are you supposed to be public with the giving or not? The point is how you do the giving, how you do the praying, how you do your deeds of righteousness. God definitely wants us to do the good things, but be careful how you do them, right? So that's exactly what
And your motive.
motivation behind it. That's right. Yeah, sometimes the best of motivation, sometimes you get caught, right? And it's kind of like, no, that's not the reason I was giving money for that or praying for that or whatever. So your motivation really does.
That reminds me of the Pharisees who used to walk across the courtyard or whatever when they knew it was going to be time to pray, so they could be in the middle of the courtyard so everybody could see them.
Yes.
They did it on purpose.
I'll go ahead and confess one that yours wasn't really a violation. This one really was. This has been something, I used to catch myself doing this all the time. I went to a bunch of different graduate schools. And I would always, when talking with other people, before the conversation was over, they knew how much education I had. It was kind of like, why do I have to do that? And the thought occurred to me, you know what, Mark, you're getting your pat on the back right now. And they didn't really pat me on the back. It was just for my, right? It paid in full, didn't accomplish anything. But it just interests me sometimes in a lot of different ways. Before the conversation's over, I found out, what kind of raises this guy got at work, or what kind of degree he has, or whatever. It's kind of like, why do we have to say that? Why do we feel like we have to say that? Well, it's because of this sometimes, right? So,
Right.
that's the very thing that I think Jesus is challenging.